since we have many a summer storm in Colorado Springs, we also had visitors who were curious to look behind those closed doors in the life class. And so they were always kept closed while the model was posing. And that particular afternoon, it had been a brooding afternoon, but I was unprepared for the fact that as the door opened, there was a clap of thunder, and in stepped Boardman Robinson. He didn't look like Satan when he opened that door to a clap of thunder, but he did look a great deal like God descended upon the earth. So that was my first experience with a great guy.
Boardman Robinson is considered by many people to be the godfather or grandfather of the arts in Colorado Springs, because he came to Colorado Springs in 1930 when Fountain Valley School was founded to establish the art program at the boys' school here. He was brought here by Elizabeth Sage Hare and Julie Penrose to be the art teacher. Now in 1919, the Broadmoor Academy was founded, and Boardman Robinson was involved with the Broadmoor Academy, Art Academy, but he was also the art teacher at Fountain Valley School. So, and I'm not sure exactly how Elizabeth Sage Hare enticed Boardman Robinson to leave New York City, where he had established himself as quite a well-known graphic artist. He was well known as a lithographer, especially his political cartoons. He established this kind of style in drawing political cartoons where he used a dark black crayon, which had the look of a lithographic print image. Very expressive, very dark, and he traveled around during the Kerensky Revolution in Russia in 1915 with John Reed, the only American to be buried in the wall of the Kremlin. And they sent back, he sent back cartoons. And John Reed wrote articles about what was happening in Russia to the Metropolitan magazine in New York City. And everybody was very interested in what was happening there at the time. It was before the stigma of socialism and communism had really sort of set in.
He became a political cartoonist because he was very interested in the problems of mankind. As a result, he was a socialist. And this was in the teens, in the early teens. And socialism for people then was more just really trying to help the poor. Not that it has changed today, but I think it was a more naive kind of thought process at the time. It was very popular to be a socialist in the New York area. But Gramps just wanted to paint. He wanted to be an artist. He did not want to get involved in politics. So in a few years he left and became a teacher at the Art Students League in New York City.
Boardman Robinson was very proud of his political cartoons. I think those were his, he felt himself that they were his greatest accomplishment. And maybe the next thing would be the Kaufman murals that he did.
Well, Boardman Robinson was a mural painter, among other things. And this is before the New Deal programs. He painted these commissioned murals for the Kaufman's department store in Pittsburgh. And these were erected in the store. There were 11 murals on the history of commerce. And these are now housed at Colorado College. They belong to the Colorado Springs Fine Arts Center, but they're in Colorado College now because the Art Center didn't have enough wall space to put them up. My father, Archie Music, was one of the muralists who took part in the first New Deal mural program, that Public Works of Art program. He, as a student of Robinson, well, let me backtrack, that program had regional directors, and the regional directors selected artists for that particular program. That one was not a competitive one, as some of the later ones were. So Robinson pretty much selected my father and Tabor Utley to be the artists for the murals for the Colorado Springs City Auditorium. The funding was for artistic embellishment for civic municipal buildings, not necessarily federal ones. So there were also murals painted in schools under that program.
And he came out to Colorado Springs in 1930, and if you think about what it was like in Colorado Springs in those days, it was almost a frontier town. It was a very sophisticated frontier town, mostly with the mining industry, but people on the East Coast knew about what was happening here. There was kind of an intellectual outpost. In Denver was a cattle town, big city for its day, but Colorado Springs was called the Newport in the Rockies. Marshall Sprague's book describes a lot of intellectual, cultural events happening here, and it was really kind of an interesting place for a lot of people to think about coming.
This is when he met Alice Bemis Taylor and Julie Penrose. And Alice wanted to give money to build a library at the Colorado College. And she also had an incredible collection of Hispanic and Native American artifacts and art. So my grandfather said, well, instead of donating for a library, you have this wonderful collection and nowhere to put it. How about doing a museum? And so that's how the conversation started. And the three women, Elizabeth Hare and Alice Bemis Taylor and Julie Penrose, got together and talked about this. And it developed with his idea of incorporating all the arts under one building, because Alice wanted to have a music room. She donated an organ to Grace Church, and she wanted to remember her husband this way. And Julie had the real estate, and it was Julie's estate where was the footprint of the Fine Arts Center. And so she donated the land. Alice donated $400,000. Gramps had the talent and no money. And Betty Hare had all the contacts in New York City for artists to come and show their work. And that's how the Fine Arts Center was started. And they broke ground in, I believe, 1935, and it was finished in 1936.
So in 1936, when the Fine Arts Center opened, it was national news. This place was unique because it had the three-part function of a performing arts center, art museum, fine arts museum, and a school. Education, performance, and fine arts. That was rather unique in those days. I mean, it was either a museum or you had a theater or an opera house or something, but to combine the three together was quite new. The Fine Arts Center was a center of interest in the arts across the country. And Boardman Robinson, as his first director and the head of the art school there and the museum, his powerful, charismatic personality was one of the strongest aspects of it. When the word got out that he was teaching in the West at a private school, students were coming here just to study with him.
So Boardman Robinson was the thread between the Broadmoor Academy and the new Fine Arts Center school that was going to be an anchor of the Fine Arts Center. And he continued the traditional aspects of the teaching here. One of his signature courses was his drawing course. And Boardman Robinson was a great illustrator. He was also a painter. That tradition of drawing the figure is one of the things that really attracted people here, especially to study under Boardman Robinson.
When we were at the Art Institute, we had both in the library seen a little book on Boardman Robinson. And the little book was published by the Colorado Springs Fine Arts Center or the Broadmoor Academy. And it was a book on full of figure drawings. And I think 98 drawings by Boardman Robinson. and it was in the library, and he was classified as being one of the finest figure draftsmen in the United States. And I said I'd like to go to Colorado Springs and study with Boardman Robinson.
An ex-student of Boardman Robinson at the Art Students League, a man by the name of Lamar Dodd, was head of the University of Georgia's art department. And I won't say I was too much for Lamar, because Lamar had turned into a painter, and a very good painter, but the draftsmanship of Robinson was the kind of drawing that I wanted to do. And so Lamar said, why don't you go study with my old teacher? And the man that'll do you the most good is Boardman Robinson.
He taught classes, but he mostly conducted what we call the Friday afternoon seminar, where all of the students and faculty met for the afternoon of Friday and discussed what had gone on in the week, and we were all required to bring our own compositions that we had done out of class. It was a very educational experience.
There would be an assignment on the previous Friday afternoon to illustrate, say, something from Shakespeare or what have you, and it usually was from literature, could be the Bible, and then you were to show up the following Friday, and the whole class would get involved in a crit. And of course you approached those classes with your heart in your mouth a little bit, but it was a great challenge, and I think a very constructive kind of exercise.
He and his wife had been students in Paris at the turn of the century. I'm not sure how old he was. I think he was about my father's age, would have made him about mid-70s. But he was mainly a philosopher. Everybody in the school adored him. And he was a marvelously wise old man.
He was wonderful and closer, I believe, to his students than he was to his own family. And I think that was probably part of his upbringing, where emotions are not displayed, the tough upper lip kind of thing. I think it was just his manner. I think that his love was deep. It just wasn't displayed very much. But he was more open with his students. But that can be easier to do because you're not as close to them. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Lou, I think, considered Gramps as a father figure to him. I could be wrong. I might have the wrong person, but I think Lou Tilley, yeah. Yeah, I think that's what he told me one day.
After the Broadmoor Academy, sort of transformed itself into the Fine Arts Center Art School, then the war happened. Afterwards, the GI Bill supported young men and women, mostly young men who wanted to be artists, and paid them their tuition and some living expenses. And so at the time, in the late 40s, there were probably 125 to 150 students combining from the GI Bill, combining with Colorado College students who wanted to study art, and they studied at the Fine Arts Center. The CC didn't really have its own art department at the time.
Boardman Robinson took us downstairs. We were on the GI Bill. Took us down the stairs, and he said to the registrar down there, to the office, and he said, if the Bransbys run out of money before the end of the month, you will write a check for them. So So that's what they did to support us while we were getting our feet on the ground.
When Boardman Robinson finally retired, mainly due to health, I mean, he was a robust man, but if his respiratory problems hadn't been an issue, he probably would have stayed on and stayed in Colorado Springs, but he had to get down to sea level so he could breathe. He really had no money. He was quite destitute. His wife Sally tore apart his sketchbooks and tried to sell pieces. She would give them away, hoping that people would send her some money for them. One of the pieces in the Fountain Valley School permanent collection is a fresco, a movable fresco, on a panel called the Sermon on the Mount that Boardman Robinson did in the mid-20s, that Lou Tilley convinced the school to buy for an exorbitant amount of money. It was probably 3 times what it was actually worth on the market, as a kind of in lieu of a pension or a retirement fund that he could live on for 3 years. He was only making probably $3,000, $4,000 a year at the Fine Arts Center in those days. So to sell something for $4,000 or $5,000 meant that he could survive on his own for a year or two, and that's all he thought maybe he had left.
When you approach the Fine Arts Center from the front entrance, you see this series of great murals above the doors that were originally painted by Boardman Robinson, depicting all of the various arts on the front of the building. Well, by the 50th anniversary of the Fine Arts Center and of the building, that mural had deteriorated to a point where it made sense to have it restored. And instead of simply having it restored, what the Fine Arts Center did was they brought in one of the former students of Boardman Robinson, Eric Bransby, to not only restore the mural, but add his own touches to it as a student of Robinson, as someone familiar with Robinson's style, but knowing that they would also get those little touches that Bransby would contribute himself. And Bransby's style is so unique to him. I mean, he's very reflective of the kind of style that he himself learned from Robinson and from Thomas Hart Benton. But it's a signature piece and almost a collaboration in an interesting sort of way between Robinson and Bransby.